question. It's a question about your relationship with your parents that I think applies to many people. It's a little long, but I think it's worth reading the whole thing. Hi Kim, I sense that I'm in a karmic relationship with my parents and family. They are very dysfunctional. However, I'm at a point right now as a married adult that I'm independent from them and not even living in the same country anymore. I've experienced such pains regarding my relationship development with my parents, from living with them to moving out to leaving the country to low contact to at the present moment no contact with them. My husband and his family are understanding of my boundaries with them. My sister, the last link I have to family, is also understanding of my distance with them. However, I have had a difficult time processing this. When the initial year came that I left the country and started a low-contact relationship, I felt so much emotional pain. I felt like I was processing a death. They stopped existing in my life. Now we are no contact, and even though I am not disturbed by their antics, my mental state is in such a delicate state that external events can and have disturbed my peace, where I slump into depression for hours if not days. I have this fear you mentioned in your teaching before, that our parents are a result of our state of consciousness. Maybe it's not totally their fault that they were toxic towards me. Maybe I have been toxic in past lives. Maybe me running away from them right now won't solve my psychology. Maybe I will attract similar people to them in my life again. What if I have to embody with them again because I didn't learn my lesson this time? Am I running away from them prematurely? Please help me with an insight that will help me move forward and be more at peace with my relationship or lack thereof with my parents. Well, I can't give you an insight that will help you with this, because the only key to changing this dynamic you're describing is to discover what is the belief in you that means that even though you have physically moved away from your parents, and even though you have physically broken off all contact, you haven't moved away psychologically. You haven't moved out of your parents' house psychologically, even though you've done it physically. So you need to discover what that belief is that makes you feel like you still have some tie that you can't break off with your parents. Now you're mentioning here that it felt like I was processing a death. They stopped existing in my life. I have met many people, and I would say I had some of it myself, even though my parents weren't dysfunctional as such. But I've met many people who, if they were honest, they would admit that they were relieved when their parents died. But the reason for this is not really the parents, it's because you have created some subconscious selves in your mind when you grew up, and maybe even in past lifetimes if you have been with these people for over many lifetimes. You created these subconscious selves where you feel that because of them you have to be a certain way. It's like, the subconscious selves form this mental box in your subconscious mind, and you have put yourself in it, and you are projecting that it's your parents who put you in it because you have to live up to their standard. And so what I'm saying is that there are people who, when their parents physically die, it's like now they can let go of that standard, because now that my parents aren't there, I don't need to live up to it anymore. Or at least you can feel that way. But the thing is, if the subconscious selves, the mental box is still there in the subconscious mind, even if your parents are physically dead, or even you have physically moved to another country, you still have that mental box in your mind. And so that's what you need to discover. And we have all the tools for discovering subconscious selves. So what I would say here is, maybe our parents, or maybe my parents are a result of my state of consciousness. It's not totally their fault that they were toxic towards me. Hello. Your parents being toxic towards you is entirely their responsibility. That's their psychology. Okay? That is absolutely their psychology. This is not your fault. Now, what you can ask yourself is, why did I choose to have these particular parents? And as I've said before we come into this embodiment, we make a divine plan. And it has two aspects. One is the gift we want to give to society, but the other is the psychology we want to resolve before we are ready to give the gift. So many times spiritual people who are in their last embodiment or close to it, we look at ourselves and we say, here's a particular aspect of my psychology that I need to overcome in order to qualify for my ascension and in order to fulfill my divine plan. But I can see that for several lifetimes I've been reluctant to face it, to look at it. So this time I'm going to put myself in a situation that's so extreme that I force myself, that I can't ignore this element in my psychology. So in other words, you can't really force yourself to face it, but you can at least increase the likelihood that you can't ignore it. And that is what it sounds to me like you have done by choosing your parents. So, sort of you're saying, maybe I have been toxic in past lives. Yeah, possibly. But I don't think it's likely. Because by asking this question, you're demonstrating you're willing to look at yourself. And toxic people are typically not willing to look at themselves. So it's more likely that you have been exposed to toxic people in previous lifetimes, and you have not been willing to define your boundaries. You've not been willing to say no. And it's not just a matter of saying no, because toxic people, what do? I mean, when you're saying they have been toxic towards me, I'm assuming we're talking about psychological. It could be a physical component, but mainly a psychological influence. And nobody can influence you psychologically unless you have something in you that makes you willing to submit to their pressure. So you need to discover what it is in you that made you vulnerable to your parents' toxicity. Why did you react to it? Why did you feel you had to take it on? Why did you feel like you had to feel guilty, you were disloyal, or whatever it is you feel? You will see that you have some kind of feeling about your parents that really isn't described here, but if you look at it, you'll see you will have some kind of predominant feeling towards your parents. And I'll give you a clue to start looking beyond this and say, what's the belief I have in the mental body about my parents, and how it could be that you feel like somehow you have to submit to abuse. You can't just walk away from it. You can't just stand up to it. Many times, you know, what really gives us a hang-up in our psychology is this, I call it a catch-22, psychological catch-22, because we somehow have a belief. I mean, we're in a situation where we're exposed to toxic people, but we somehow have a belief that we can't just walk away from it, or that we can't just not react to it. So you will see sometimes in families, you will see that here's two parents that are toxic, but there's two children. And one of them is deeply affected by this, and the other one is seemingly not affected at all, because they react differently. They have different subconscious mechanisms. And you might, if you're in contact with your sister, talk to your sister about how she experienced the childhood. And see if you can see that she reacted differently to your parents than you do. And then ask yourself, why do I have the reaction? What's the belief? Why do I think I have to respond to my parents, submit to my parents? Why do I think I still have to carry them with me even though I've physically moved away from them? So there's something there in how you see yourself. And it could very well relate to this that I talk about in my series about avatar psychology, that you received this birth trauma many years ago when you came to Earth, and you still haven't shaken that. You haven't resolved that. And therefore you still feel like you're afraid you made a mistake by coming to Earth. You're afraid there's something wrong with you. And therefore, in a sense, you feel like you have to submit to this abuse. You can't just say no, or walk away from it, or choose not to react. So there is some belief that you have that causes you to continually submit to something your parents are projecting at you. The idea that there's something wrong with you. And quite frankly, the idea that there's something wrong with you, the only thing wrong with you is the idea that there's something wrong with you. You may still have a subconscious self that needs to be resolved, but that subconscious self is not you. So there is nothing wrong with you. Who you are as the conscious you, as an extension of your I Am Presence that is an extension of the greatest being. There's nothing wrong with you. Doesn't matter what the fallen beings have projected at you over many lifetimes. Perhaps your parents are fallen beings, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, I sense here that what is really going on in your psychology is that you still have some belief that there's something wrong with you. And you need to discover exactly what that belief is, what form that takes in you, why you think there's something wrong with you. And there is, in my book, Healing Your Spiritual Traumas, Mother Mary gives an exercise for going back and resolving that birth trauma. And perhaps by following that exercise, you can come to see what was the belief you took on when you first came to Earth, that there's something wrong with you here on Earth because you don't live up to some kind of standard defined by the fallen beings. And perhaps your parents have projected some standard on you that you can't live up to, you don't want to live up to, but you still feel there's something wrong with you because you can't or won't live up to it. I'm just, whatever comes to me here, I'm just expressing, but it may be something different, but then you need to work with that. And as I said, the exercise in the book, Healing Your Spiritual Traumas, might be helpful to you. You need to really look at this from different angles. You need to come to see something you haven't seen before. And once you see it, once you resolve it, it's like the clouds are going to clear and you're going to see, oh, it's just a self, it's just a belief I took on, it's not real, it's not who I am, I haven't become this. There is really nothing wrong with me. And then you will feel such a relief. But it takes work to get there. I can't just give you an insight that will resolve it. But I can certainly, I hope I've given you some insights that can help you move forward.